We Are One Body Audio Theater presents The Reluctant Dragon by Kenneth Grahame.
Way back when, no. In ancient times, no, that's too much. Long ago, there was an old shepherd who spent his days up on the wide pasture of the downs, with only the sun and the stars and the sheep for company. When I wasn't helping him, and often when I was as well, I spent much of my time buried in large books about sensible things like natural history and fairy tales. One evening, my father, who for some nights had been disturbed and preoccupied, came home all in a tremble.
That's it, Maria. That's it. I'm never going up on them there downs again.
Now don't you take on like that. Just tell us whatever it is that has you shaken up, and then between me and you and the girl here, we ought to be able to get to the bottom of it.
You know that cave up there? I never liked it somehow, and the sheep never liked it neither. And when sheep don't like a thing, well, there's generally a good reason for it. Well, for some time past, there's been faint noises coming from that cave. Noises like heavy sighings with grunts mixed up in them. I was terribly frightened. Yet somehow I couldn't keep away. So this very evening, I ventured toward the cave. And there, oh Lord, there I saw him at last, as plain as I see you.
Saw who?
Why, him, I tell you. He was sticking halfway out of the cave and seemed to be enjoying the cool of the evening in a poetical sort of way. He was as big as 4 cart horses and all covered with shiny scales, deep blue scales at the top of him, shading off to a tender sort of green below. And he had his chin on his paws. And I should say he was meditating about things. Oh, yes, a peaceable sort of beast enough, I admit that. But scales and claws and a tail for certain, though I didn't see that end of him. What am I to do?
I looked up from my book and closed it.
Oh, it's all right, Father. Don't you worry. It's only a dragon.
Only a dragon? What do you mean sitting there, you and your dragons? Only a dragon indeed. And what do you know about it?
'Cause it is, and 'cause I do know. Look here, Father. You know we've each of us got our line. You know about sheep and weather and things. Mother knows about mending and cooking. I know about dragons. I always said, you know, that cave up there was a dragon cave. And I always said it must have belonged to a dragon at some time, and ought to belong to a dragon now, if rules count for anything. Now, please, just leave this all to me. I'll stroll up to the cave tomorrow evening, if I'm quite free, and I'll have a talk with him. Only, please don't you go worrying around there without me. You don't understand them a bit, and they're very sensitive, you know.
She's quite right, Father. As she says, dragons is her line, and not ours. Besides, if the beast ain't quite respectable, our daughter will find out quick enough.
The following evening, after I had my tea, I strolled up the chalky track that led to the summit of the downs. And there, enough, I found the dragon, stretched lazily in the grass in front of the cave. A cool breeze played over the surface of the fields, and the silver shoulder of a large moon was showing above distant junipers. No wonder the dragon seemed in a peaceful and contented mood. Indeed, as I approached, I could hear the beast purring with a happy regularity.
Well, who would have thought? None of my books ever told me that dragons purred. Hello, dragon!
Who's that? Oh, don't you hit me, or throw stones, or squirt water at me, or anything. I won't have it, I tell you. I won't have it.
I sat on the grass beside the beast.
I'm not going to hit you. I've simply looked in to ask how you were and all that sort of thing. But if I'm in the way, I can easily clear out.
No. Oh, don't go off in a huff. Fact is, I am as happy as the day is long up here. Never without an occupation, my child. Never without an occupation. And yet, between ourselves, it is a trifle dull at times.
Going to make a long stay here?
Oh, I can't hardly say at present. It seems a nice place enough, but I've only been here a short time. And besides, I'm going to tell you something you would never guess if you tried ever so. Fact is, I'm such a confoundedly lazy fellow.
You surprise me.
Oh, it's true enough. But I always let the active fellows do everything, you know. Yes. Oh dear, what can I tell you? You see, all the other chaps were so active, always rampaging and skirmishing, chasing knights all over the place and devouring maidens and young damsels and going on generally, whereas I like to prop my back against a bit of rock and doze a bit and wake up and think about things going on and how they kept going on any old way. And so, well, when it happened, I was fairly caught.
When what happened, please?
I don't know precisely. I suppose the earth sneezed or shook itself, or the bottom dropped out of something. Well, anyway, there was a shake and a roar and a general stramash, and I found myself miles away underground and wedged in as tight as tight. Well, thank goodness my wants are few, and I have such an active mind, always occupied, I assure you, always occupied. But time went on, and there was a general sameness about the life, and at last I began to think it would be fun to work my way upstairs and see what you other fellows are up to. So I scratched and burrowed and worked my way this and that, until at last I came up through this cave here.
What is it your mind's always occupied about? That's what I want to know.
Oh, well, did you ever, just for fun, try to make up poetry verses?
Of course I have. Heaps of it. And some of it's quite good. Only no one here cares about it. Mother's very kind and all when I read it to her, and so's father for that matter. But somehow they don't seem to...
That's exactly my own case, you know. They don't seem to. And anyway, you can't argue with them about it. Now, you've got culture, you have. I could see that at once. And so I would just like your candid opinion about little things that I threw off lightly when I was down there. I'm awfully pleased to have met you, and I am hoping the other neighbors will be equally agreeable.
Dragon, when you talk of neighbors and settling down and so on, I can't help feeling that you don't quite realize your position. You're an enemy of the human race, you see.
Oh, haven't got an enemy in the world. Too lazy to make them anyway. And if I do read other fellows my poetry, well, I'm always ready to listen to theirs.
Oh dear, I'd wish you'd try and grasp the situation properly. When the other people find out, they'll come after you with spears and swords and all sorts of things. You have to be exterminated, according to their way of looking at it, and they don't easily change their views. You're a scourge and a pest and a baneful monster.
Not a word of truth in it. Character will bear the strictest investigation. And now, there's this little sonnet thing I was working on when you appeared on the scene.
Oh, if you won't be sensible, I'm going off home. No, I can't stop for sonnets. My mother is waiting for me. I'll see you tomorrow. And do, for goodness sake, try to realize that you're a pestilential scourge, or you'll find yourself in a most awful fix. Good night.
Good night.
Perhaps I had been too harsh on the dragon, but it was the truth, and he had to hear it. I returned the next evening, and henceforth we spent many a pleasant night, sitting on the pasture, while the dragon told stories of old, old times, when dragons were quite plentiful and the world was a livelier place than it is now. And life was full of thrills and jumps and surprises. But, as I feared, even the most modest and retiring dragon in the world, if he's as big as 4 cart horses and covered with blue scales, it cannot keep altogether out of public view. Talk of the dragon circulated throughout the village. Despite never formally meeting a dragon, they were all very frightened and talked terribly about the creature. And although the villagers considered it a distinction to have a dragon of their own, they maintained that the beast needed to be slayed. That's when I heard the horrifying news and ran straight to the dragon.
It's all up, dragon. He's coming. He's here now. You have to pull yourself together and do something at last.
Don't be hysterical, girl. Sit down and get your breath and try and remember that the noun governs the verb. And then perhaps you'll be good enough to tell me who's coming.
That's right. Take it coolly. Hope you'll be half as cool when I'm through with my news. It's only St. George the Dragon Slayer who's coming. That's all. He rode into the village half an hour ago. Oh, of course you can lick him, though. A great big fellow like you.
Oh, dearie, dearie me. This is too awful. I won't see him, and that's flat. I don't want to know the fellow at all. I'm sure he's not at all nice. Now, you must tell him to go away at once. Please, say he can write if he likes, but I'm not seeing anybody at present.
Now, dragon, don't be stubborn and wrong-headed. You've got to fight him sometime or other, you know, 'cause he's St. George and you're the dragon. Better get it over, and then we can go on with our sonnets. And you ought to consider other people a little, too. If you think it's been dull up here for you, think how dull it's been for me.
My dear little child, just understand once for all that I can't fight and I won't fight. In old days, I always let the other fellows, the earnest fellows, do all the fighting, and no doubt that's why I have the pleasure of being here today.
But if you don't fight, he'll cut your head off.
Oh, I think not. You'll be able to arrange something. I've every confidence in you. You're such a manager. Just run down, there's a dear, and make it all right. I leave it entirely to you.
I made my way back to the village in a state of great despondency. My dear and honored friend, the dragon, hadn't shown up in quite the heroic light as I would have liked. And whether the dragon was a hero at heart or not, it made no difference, for St. George would most undoubtedly cut his head off.
Arrange things indeed. The dragon treats the whole affair as if it were an invitation to tea and croquet.
It was late evening as I pursued my way to the inn and passed into the principal chamber where St. George now sat alone.
May I come in, St. George? I want to talk to you about this little matter of the dragon. If you're not tired of it by this time.
Yes, come in, child. Another tale of misery and wrong, I have no doubt. Is it a kind parent, then, of whom the tyrant has bereft you? Or some tender sister or brother? Well, it shall soon be avenged.
Oh, nothing of the sort. There's a misunderstanding somewhere, and I want to put it right. The fact is, this is a good dragon.
Exactly. I quite understand. A good dragon. Believe me, I do not in the least regret that he is an adversary worthy of my steel.
Oh dear, how stupid men are when they get an idea into their heads. I tell you, he's a good dragon, and a friend of mine, and tells the most beautiful stories you ever heard. He's been so kind to Mother, and Mother'd do anything for him. And Father likes him too, though Father doesn't hold with art and poetry much, and always falls asleep when the dragon starts talking about style. But the fact is, nobody can help liking him once they know him. He's so engaging and so trustful, and as simple as a child.
Sit down and draw up a chair. I like a person who sticks up for her friends. And I'm sure the dragon has his good points if he's got a friend like you. And yet, may not this wily beast have misled you as to his real character, in order that your good report of him may serve as a cloak for his evil deeds?
I assure you, St. George, the dragon's a real gentleman, every inch of him. And may I say that no one would be more shocked and grieved than he would at hearing you talk like that.
Perhaps I've misjudged the animal. But what are we to do? The town is expecting a fight. Here are the dragon and I, almost face to face, each supposed to be thirsting for each other's blood. I don't see any way out of it exactly. What do you suggest? Can't you arrange things somehow?
That's just what the dragon said. Really, the way you two seem to leave everything to me. I suppose you couldn't be persuaded to go away quietly. Could you?
Impossible, I fear. Quite against the rules. You know that as well as I do.
Well then, look here. It's early yet. Would you mind strolling up with me and seeing the dragon and talking it over? It's not far, and any friend of mine will be most welcome.
Well, it's irregular. But really, it seems about the most sensible thing to do. You're taking a lot of trouble on your friend's account. But cheer up. Perhaps there won't have to be any fight after all.
Oh, but I hope there will, though.
As we entered the cave, the dragon was deeply snoring.
I've brought a friend to see you, dragon.
I was just thinking about things. Very pleased to make your acquaintance, dear sir. Charming weather we're having, isn't it?
This is St. George. St. George, let me introduce you to the dragon. We've come up to talk things over, dragon. And for goodness sake, do let us have a little straight common sense and come to some practical arrangement in a timely manner. And perhaps, may I add, that my mother is waiting for me.
Oh, so glad to meet you, St. George, because I've heard you're a great traveller, and I've always been rather a stay-at-home. But I can show you many interesting antiquities and features of our countryside if you're stopping here.
I think that we'd really better take the advice of our young friend here and try to come to some understanding about this little affair of ours. Now, don't you think that the simplest plan would be just to fight it out according to the rules and let the best man win?
Oh yes, do, dragon. It'll save such a lot of bother.
My young friend, you shut up. Believe me, St. George, there's nobody in the world I'd sooner oblige than you and this young lady here. But the whole thing's nonsense and conventionality and popular thick-headedness. There's absolutely nothing to fight about from beginning to end. And anyhow, I'm not going to do it. So that settles it.
But this would be a beautiful place for a fight. This great rolling pasture for the arena, me in my golden armor showing up against your big blue scaly coils. Think what a picture that would make.
Now you're trying to get at me through my artistic sensibilities. But it won't work. Although it would make a very pretty picture, as you say.
We seem to be getting rather nearer to the business. You must see, Dragon, that there's got to be a fight of some sort. It's the rules.
It might be arranged. I must spear you somewhere, of course, but I'm not bound to hurt you very much. There's such a lot of you that there must be a few spare places somewhere, under your neck, for instance. All these folds of thick skin. If I speared you here, you'd never even know I'd done it.
Yes, but are you sure you can hit off the right place?
Of course I am. You leave that to me.
It's just because I've got to leave it to you that I'm asking. No doubt you would deeply regret any error made in the heat of the moment, but I would regret it twice as much as you should.
Look here, Dragon. I don't quite see where you come in. There's to be a fight, apparently, and you're to be licked? The mighty dragon? What I want to know is, what are you going to get out of it?
Sir George, just tell her, please, what will happen after I'm vanquished in the deadly combat.
Well, according to the rules, I suppose I shall lead you in triumph down to the marketplace.
Precisely. And then?
And then there'll be shoutings and speeches and things, and I shall explain that you're converted and see the error of your ways and so on.
Yes, quite so. And then?
Oh, and then? Why, and then there will be the usual banquet, I suppose.
Exactly. And that's where I come in. Look here, girl. I'm bored to death up here, and no one really appreciates me. I'm going into society, I am, with the kindly aid of our friend here. And you'll find I have all the qualities needed to endear me to people. And now that it's all settled, if you don't mind, I must rest up for my grand performance.
Just remember, you'll have to do your proper share of the fighting, Dragon. I mean ramping and breathing fire and so on.
Oh, I can ramp all right. As to breathing fire, well, it's surprising how easily one gets out of practice. However, I'll do the best I can. Good night.
The next morning, the villagers began streaming up to the downs at quite an early hour in their Sunday clothes, each one intent on securing good places for the combat. I was feeling as anxious as a stage manager on opening night. Dragon be depended upon? He might change his mind and deem the whole performance rubbish, or, seeing this affair had been so hastily planned, without even rehearsal, he might be too nervous to show up. Suddenly, a sound of cheering and a waving of handkerchiefs welcomed St. George as he rode slowly toward the grim mouth of the cave. Very gallant and beautiful he looked, his golden armor glancing in the sun, and his spear ready for battle. The lines of spectators began to give back a little, nervously. A low muttering, mingled with snorts, now made itself heard. It rose to a bellowing roar that seemed to fill the plain, and then a cloud of smoke obscured the mouth of the cave, and out of the midst of it, the dragon himself, shining sea blue magnificent, prancing splendidly forth, smoke and fire incessantly jetting from his angry nostrils, and the crowd was in awe.
Oh, well done, Dragon. Didn't think he had it in him.
St. George lowered his spear, bent his head, dug his heels into his horse's sides, and came thundering over the turf. The dragon charged with a roar and a squeal, a great blue whirling combination of coils and snorts and clashing jaws and spikes and fire. Miss, the crowd yelled. dragon sat down and barked viciously, while St. George pulled his horse around into position with difficulty.
End of round 1. How well they managed it. But I hope the saint won't get excited. I can trust the dragon all right. What a regular actor that fellow is.
St. George had at last prevailed in steadying his horse and was looking around himself as he wiped his brow. Catching sight of me, he smiled and nodded and held up 3 fingers for an instant.
It seems to be all planned out. Round 3's to be the finishing one, evidently. Wish it could have lasted a bit longer.
St. George now gathered up his reins and began to move forward, dropping the point of his spear and settling himself firmly into the saddle. The dragon on end and began to leap from one side to the other with hugely ungainly bounds. This naturally disconcerted the horse, who swerved violently, the saint only just saving himself by the mane. And as they shot past, the dragon delivered a vicious snap at the horse's tail. Round 2 evoked audible evidence of friendly feeling towards the dragon. The spectators were not slow to appreciate a combatant who could hold his own so well and clearly wanted to show good sport. And many encouraging remarks reached the ears of my friend as he strutted to and fro, his chest thrust out and his tail in the air, hugely enjoying his new popularity. St. George had dismounted and was tightening his girths. Giving the horse encouragement, I made my way down to the saint and held his spear for him.
It's been a jolly fight, St. George. Can't you let it last a bit longer?
Well, I think I'd better not. The fact is, your old friend's getting a bit conceited. Now they've begun cheering him, and he'll forget all about the arrangement and take to playing the fool, and there's no telling where he would stop. I'll just finish him off this round.
St. George swung himself into the saddle, and I handed him back his spear.
Now, don't you be afraid. I've marked my spot exactly, and he's sure to give me all the assistance in his power, because he knows it's his only chance of being asked to the banquet.
St. George now shortened his spear, bringing the butt well up under his arm, and instead of galloping as before, trotted smartly towards the dragon, who crouched at his approach, flicking his tail till it cracked in the air like a great cart whip. The saint wheeled as he neared his opponent and circled warily around him, keeping his eye on the spare place, while the dragon, adopting similar tactics, paced with caution around the same circle, occasionally thrusting his head. So the two sparred for an opening, while the spectators maintained a breathless silence. Though the round lasted for some minutes, the end was so swift that all I saw was lightning movement of the saint's arm, and then a whirl and confusion of spines, claws, tail, and flying bits of turf.
Egad, I'm slain!
The dust cleared away. The spectators whooped and ran in cheering, and I could see that the dragon was down, pinned to the earth by the spear, while St. George had dismounted and stood astride him. It all seemed so genuine that I feared the dear old dragon was actually hurt. But as I approached, the dragon lifted one eyelid, winked solemnly, and collapsed again. He was held fast to the earth by the neck, but the saint had hit him in the spare place agreed upon. The applauding crowd asked St. George if he was going to cut the beast's head off.
Well, not today, I think. You see, that can be done at any time. There's no hurry at all. I think we'll all go down to the village first and, have some refreshment. And then I'll give him a good talking to, and you'll find he'll be a very different dragon.
At that magic word, refreshments, the whole crowd formed up in procession and silently awaited the signal to start. St. George, hauling on his spear with both hands, released the dragon, who rose and shook himself and ran his eye over his spikes and scales and things to see that they were all in order. And then the saint mounted and led off the procession, the dragon following meekly with me by his side. After refreshments, St. George made a grand speech to all those in attendance about truth and battles and sin.
And one final thing. The dragon has been thinking over things and has vowed to mend his ways. And, if you will let him, he would like to settle down here. But you must make friends and not be prejudiced. You mustn't go about fancying you know everything there is to be known, because you don't, not by a long way. And you shouldn't be so fond of fights, because next time, you might have to do the fighting yourselves.
And then he sat down. Amidst much repentant cheering, and the dragon nudged me in the ribs and whispered that he couldn't have done it better himself. And then everyone went off to get ready for the banquet. The especially nice thing about a banquet is that it comes when something is over, and there's nothing more to worry about. And tomorrow seems a long way off. St. George was happy because there had been a fight, and he hadn't had to kill anybody, for he didn't really like killing, though he generally had to do it. Dragon was happy because there had been a fight, and although he had been hurt, he had won popularity and a sure footing in society. I was happy because there had been a fight, and in spite of it all, my two friends were on the best of terms. And all the others were happy because there had been a fight, and, well, they didn't require any reasons for their happiness. The dragon exerted himself to say the right thing to everybody and prove the life and soul of the evening, while the saint and I, as we looked on, felt that we were only assisting at a feast of which the honor and glory were entirely the dragon's. But we didn't mind that, and the dragon was not in the least proud or forgetful. On the contrary, every 10 minutes or so, he leaned over towards me, said impressively,
Look here, you will see me home afterwards, won't you?
And I always nodded, though I had promised my mother not to be out late. At last, the banquet was over. The guests had dropped away with many good nights and congratulations and invitations. And the dragon, who had seen the last of them off the premises, emerged into the street. We set off up the hill arm in arm, the saint, the dragon, and I, gazing at the stars. And as we turned the last corner and disappeared from view, the village could hear snatches of an old song borne back on the night breeze. They couldn't be certain from whence the singing came, but I can tell you that it was the dragon.
That was The Reluctant Dragon by Kenneth Grahame. Adapted for audio by John Wojtechko. Directed by John Wojtechko. Assistant directed by Grettelyn Darkey. And produced by Thomas Marinchak. The cast in order of appearance was Nancy McKinnon as the narrator, Rick Manasa as father, Kassie Stire as mother, Ellie Troiani as the child, Paul Fox as the dragon, and Robert Howard as St. George. Foley and sound design by Joseph Adams and Jacob Gorsich. Original music composed by John Wojtechko. A production of We Are One Body Audio Theater.